First off, the content of the exam has not changed. You still have logic games, logical reasoning, and reading comprehension. That's all the same. You still have your experimental section as well. That's the same. But there are some important content delivery mechanisms that have changed, specifically how the LSAT is displayed on the tablet. So first off, it's not on a computer. It's not going to be like a full 8.5 by 11 PDF. It's going to be individual, bite-sized, one question being presented to you at a time. So you can't see all the questions associated with the game at once. You can't see all the questions associated with the passage at once. And you can't even see the passage entirely and the questions at the same time. So one big thing I would suggest is limit your field of vision, narrow it in some way. If you're using PDFs, maybe you enlarge the size of the PDF, or you take screenshots of individual questions to limit what you're able to see at once. The other biggest thing I would say is that you're used to, in your LSAT prep books, writing on the page, writing on top of the question. You can no longer do that. You will get underlining tools and highlighting annotation tools on the digital LSAT, but you won't be able to draw freehand like you would be able to on a piece of paper, for example. And so I would say treat your books like they were a computer screen. Treat your PDFs like they're on the screen. Don't use PDF annotation tools to draw on them with any sort of freehand notes you might otherwise do. Have your booklet of scratch paper to the side. LSAC will be giving you a booklet of scratch paper, maybe 14 pages, maybe 16 pages. They still have not confirmed the actual number of pages yet, even though we're less than a month out from the July LSAT. So just trust that you'll have enough, but not unlimited scratch paper to do with what you would like. As far as the July LSAT is concerned specifically, which I know many of you are taking, you mentioned here, July LSAT specifically is going to be a little bit different because this is their transitional test administration. Half of students get the paper and pencil format, half get the digital format. LSAC chooses for you, and you don't get any advance notice, which is a little bit nerve-wracking for some, but there are a few benefits to July as well. Specifically, they're going to let you see your score before deciding whether to cancel. And if you do cancel, they're giving you a free retake on a future LSAT administration. So with the LSAT costing about $200, that's pretty nice. That's a good chunk of change that you can save. And I think that anyone who does cancel on the July LSAT specifically, law schools will not look askance at that. They won't be too concerned about that because so many people will be canceling July, given that LSAC is giving folks an incentive to do so. The LSAC announced about a week ago, it was kind of actually leaked from their annual meeting around May 30th. Someone took a photo of a PowerPoint presentation they had. They were not planning to announce this yet, but anyway, LSAC, it used to be that there was no limit on the number of times you could take the LSAT, I believe. Then in 2017, they instituted a new limit saying you could only take the LSAT 3 times in a 2-year period, which is quite a limit. They removed that limit, so it was unlimited, which was great. That was part of LSAC's new campaign to be more friendly, in part due to competition with the GRE. So there were no limits at all over the past 2 years on the number of times you could take the LSAT. But now that they are starting to offer the LSAT more frequently, they're going to be offering it 10 times a year moving forward. They have to start reusing old LSAT test forms because it costs them $750,000 to create a new LSAT test form, a new LSAT prep test of 100 or so questions. So they can't just produce 10 new exams a year. That would cost them way too much money. They don't have the ability to ramp up like that quickly in terms of the production. And so to counteract that, they're actually going to create a new limit on the number of times you can take the LSAT. The details are on lsac.org if you want to see them all. And I'll send out an email to everybody after this webinar with the link to that as well. But basically now, you can only take the LSAT 3 times in any one LSAT testing year, and only, I think, 5 times over a period of 5 years. Once you have, or 5 times in a 3-year period, and then once you've gotten a 180, you can't take it again, and you can only take it 7 times over the course of your life. So I know I've said a lot there, but the bottom line is that there are some limitations. It probably won't affect too many people because most people don't take the LSAT 4 times in a single testing year. But these are new limits. They are a result of LSAC's need to reuse old LSAT test forms. So let's say someone takes the Sabbath Observer's exam in February, then LSAC administers that as the June exam in Asia, then they administer it in North America in September. That could theoretically happen, and it does happen, but it's going to be happening more and more and more now that there are only 4 new exams being created a year, approximately 3 of which are released, and then they're administering it 10 times a year. So that is a new limit. Kind of interesting. I wish they weren't doing this because I think it's to the detriment of test takers, but that's what they've got to do. I hope that they figure out a way to create more new test forms going forward, because it's to the students' benefit to be able to take it as many times as you possibly need to reach your highest potential and get the scholarship money or get into a better law school, whatever it may be. I think that basically LSAC has significantly ramped up the number of test administrations because they want to be more accessible. They want to be more friendly. Many law schools have in the past few years started accepting applicants with GRE scores. Not that many people. I've talked to a couple of folks. I talked to Rob Schwartz, the dean of admissions at UCLA. I talked to Kristen Mercado at UC Davis, and both of them said, and the interviews are on YouTube, by the way, if you want to listen to those or watch those interviews. But basically, both of them said that fewer than 5% of applicants who were accepted had applied with GRE scores specifically. So most students are not applying with GRE scores, but LSAC is still very concerned about competition from the GRE because the GRE is administered on the computer already, has been for many years now, and is available to take pretty much every single weekday, 12 months a year. The LSAT previously was only 4 times a year: February, June, September, or October, and then December. So 4 times a year versus nearly every weekday. Obviously, GRE wins that one. So LSAC has looked to ramp that up and said, well, we can do 10 times a year, which is pretty good, nearly every single month. Now, instead of having to wait 2 to 3 months to retake if you feel that like you need to, now you've only got to stay fresh on the LSAT for another month or so at most. So that's pretty appealing. So they're doing their best. And the LSAT, of course, is much more difficult to create than the GRE is. GRE, they can just substitute new math questions or new vocabulary questions, new vocabulary words, new numbers for different math problems. Very easy. The LSAT, on the other hand, has such intricacies of language that I think it just is not possible to create new test forms that easily, new test questions that easily. I talked to one guy who's a former writer of actual LSAT questions, and he told me that they might take 1 out of 10 questions he proposes to them or submits to them or writes. They would only take 1 question out of 10, and that was considered pretty good. So their standards are very, very high. It takes a tremendous amount of work to create a single new LSAT question or a single new test form. And so they're doing the best they can. They can't do more than 10 test administrations a year, at least for now. And it would cost them a ton of money to create more tests. Like I said, it cost them $750,000 to create 1 test form, and that number might even be outdated at this point. So that's why, but they can't go beyond that. And so that's going to lead them to be a little bit less transparent, unfortunately. Not ideal, but most serious law school applicants should be taking the LSAT anyway, regardless. I think that GRE typically applies to those who have some sort of unique background or work experience of some kind. But for the average person, the average pre-law, the average humanities or political science major, the LSAT's probably the way to go.